Hey scrappers, if you're looking to figure out what materials you should sell this week or hold this week, now is the time to do it. Our weekly report is going to give you that information, up-to-date market news, pricing. Let's get right into it and we'll talk about it inside. Scrappers, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of the day it is. I hope everything is going well. Today is Wednesday, January 24th, 2024, and I can't believe it. The first month of the year is almost over. Things have been going, I'm going to say, relatively calmly when it comes to scrap prices. We haven't really seen much market shifts over this month, but we'll talk about some of those things. But first and foremost, we have new videos that drop every single week on YouTube, whether it's our YouTube Shorts, whether it's our instructional videos, our informative videos. So please check those out. If you're looking for videos to be made, let us know. When you let us know, that's when we are able to produce those videos and help you learn about the scrap markets and how you can make more money inside of the scrap markets. And hopefully that's why you're tuning in today, to learn about some of the things that are going on. So what was nice, first thing this morning, I look at the markets and I see copper jumping over 2%. In the last week, we've seen a 3.7% increase since we spoke last Wednesday. And we'll pull up some of the copper prices to see what's been happening over the last few days and the last few weeks. We can see that some of the markets are increasing. 306 for Bear Bright, 289 for number one tubing. So we are seeing a lot of green on there. Bear Bright did have a little bit of a pullback. We saw some people becoming a little less aggressive in the market. If we could click on Bear Bright real quick, we'll see some of the reported prices that have come in: 265, 302, 308, 345. Some pretty solid numbers overall throughout the country. So we're watching these markets, and one of the reasons that we've seen that 3.7% increase in the last week was because of a lot of news that was coming out of China. So the Chinese announced that their 2023 growth numbers were a little over 5% year over year, but it was under what they really wanted because 2020, 21, and 2022 were a little bit of a pullback because of COVID. So last year was the first year that China really opened up its doors for trade, let its people out of their houses and apartments, and went back to business as usual. And now what we're seeing out of the Chinese is that they're having some problems, and they're talking about economic stimulus to help the banks push out lending, to see some more economic and industrial growth. And that was really why we saw the 8.5-cent jump this morning and about 11 cents over the last week. What I don't like about that, though, is that those pieces, those price increases are not coming from a supply and demand standpoint. They're coming from a future news type of a thing. And that's where a lot of the price jumps have really happened over the last year that I can recall. You know, we did see copper prices over $4 at one point last year, but really in the last 6 to 8 months, we've been in a range that have been in the $3.50 to $4 range. Now, when I look at the copper prices and the scrap prices, I try to look at that supply and demand. And inside my weekly report, I spoke about Apple today, and it was a very interesting thing because a lot of people are saying, oh my gosh, the stock market, the Dow Jones, the S&P, the NASDAQ, they're all hitting record highs. That's so good for the economy. And it's interesting because less than 5% of Americans actually own stock. And when you look at things and you say, okay, well, let's take 1 million people that own iPhones. Well, 1 million people own iPhones, and you had to buy that phone, or you're paying for that phone through payments. But I bet you not 1 million people own Apple stock. So we're seeing a small group of investors, hedge funds, 401ks, and that type of thing that are investing heavily into these companies that everyday consumers are using their products, whether it's Walmart, Apple, or some of the big ones, Amazon, right? But we're not seeing the consumer growth. We're buying items as consumers that we need and buying less items that we want. You know, that's kind of like when I teach my kids, Well, you don't need a new toy. You want a new toy. You need to eat food, right? And when we're looking at things, when we're looking at consumer staples, and there's something called the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index. And what that says is consumers are not willing to pay or buy extra things right now because they would rather use their car for a couple more years versus buying a new car that went up $10,000. They would rather use their iPhone, their iPad, their laptop for another year or two because while technology is good, it's not so much better than it was from their 1 or 2 or 3-year-old model that they need to upgrade. What does that mean? That means that people are holding things longer. Less things are getting recycled. Your old iPhone is staying in your pocket instead of going to a secondary market. And then that secondary market, the ones that aren't good, are getting recycled. That's not happening right now. Same thing in the auto sector. New car lots are now full again, right? You see auto dealers starting to negotiate prices where for the last 2 years or so, you were ordering a car online, kind of like you were ordering a custom pair of shoes. You picked all your options, you clicked buy it now, and you went through in the process. Where nowadays we have an oversupply of items and goods, and that's because the consumer still isn't very strong because the inflation that went up so high, even though we've seen it start to come down, people aren't buying more metal products. An example going into the springtime will be barbecue grills. You know, we always see right around Memorial Day, a lot of people going out there and buying grills, but they're predicting this year that less people will be buying new grills because they're making repairs to their old one. They don't want to spend $600, $300 on a new grill when they can replace a few parts and be a little handy. So those are the things that we look for when it comes to scrap metal demand. That's from a consumer side of things. And then when I look at the commercial side of things, I look at where the growth is or where the growth is not, more importantly. Everywhere I have driven in the last 3 or 4 months, I notice construction. 95% of that construction is on condo buildings, apartment buildings, and houses. More for the condos and the apartments. So what are you seeing? Huge buildings going up with 500 units inside. How are they being built? Concrete and wood. Because when you build residential, you don't need to build it with as much metal as you do commercial buildings. So you're seeing wood being used instead of steel being used. And that has an impact on the economy as well. You know, we have seen steel prices have a relatively level, price market this month. We saw a little bit of an uptick on the East Coast. We saw some light iron prices jumping. We'll pull up some of the steel prices just so we can kind of see where the markets are at right now. But we don't see that large industrial growth that we really hoped for. And going into 2024 with the interest rates where they are, I don't expect that to happen. But when we pull up some of the 30-day averages, we are seeing green here, and that's indicative of where the markets are. We're seeing light iron prices, cast iron prices, all climbing to very good levels. Auto prices in the 165 range, rotors 250, light iron we're looking around 165, 170, shred 161. Here are some prices we can see on the side. So we're seeing a very steady market, but again, we're seeing steady markets. We are seeing export, which is good. Exporting steel, while many people want it to remain in the country, the export market helps drive up the domestic market. And what do I mean? Well, if companies or countries, India, Turkey, need large quantities of steel, well, they're going to put larger orders in. What does that do? It drives up the price in the United States. So the local manufacturers, the local steel recyclers, the furnaces in the US, they need to pay more money to keep that steel here in the country opposed to exporting it. And when you look at the export market right now, we have a couple of problems which are being offset by lower fuel prices, but I'm reading about many ships that are diverting all the way around the coast of Africa because of problems in the Middle East with the Houthis shooting rockets at many ships, to missiles, whatever they're shooting. I'm not a military guy, but when you have problems that are causing ships to be rerouted on an extra 10 to 14-day voyage around Africa, they're eating up more fuel, which is going to lead to lower prices, whether it's for grain, rice, or steel, that still impacts the markets. Now, the good news is that oil prices are much lower than they were 6, 8, 10 months ago. Really, we think back to June 2022. I paid $2.79 the other day for regular when I was paying $5.50. So I'll certainly take a price that's half what I was paying 2 years ago. But those higher fuel prices still are continuing to create higher costs to move products and goods, and that's going to affect things as well. Now, I mentioned the Chinese before, and I mentioned some of the price increases. We've seen gold go up over a percentage point in the last week. We've seen platinum 2.5% increase, palladium 4.7% increase, and rhodium was down slightly. So I mentioned those because of the catalytic converter markets, which unfortunately really are hitting multi-year lows for averages, where we're averaging for OEM cats right now around $68. In this week, I generally have my hold or sell recommendations, and catalytic converters might be something that you want to hold on to, but think about what I referenced a few minutes ago. If people aren't buying new cars, then the amount of catalytic converter material is not going to be needed, because we're just not seeing those cars fly off the lots like we did in 2021. So that's going to cause a bit of a bottleneck when it comes to catalytic converter prices, which is what we've seen. And until we start to see prices for autos coming down, emission rates going up, and more precious metals going into those catalytic converters, I don't expect to see a large increase in the catalytic converter markets for the foreseeable future. When I look at other uses for platinum, palladium, and rhodium, and such a large percentage, 90 to 95% of those metals are directly used in the auto sector, then that just shows me that the demand for catalytic converter scrap, while we always need it, it's not nearly as strong as it was. And with interest rates up, with borrowing costing more money nowadays, these are all things that affect all of the prices in general, and that includes aluminum as well. Aluminum in the last week, we've seen up over 3%, but when we pull up some of the scrap aluminum prices and we look at some of the basic markets just in a second, we're not seeing that huge 3% increase hitting the scrap markets. I sell sheet aluminum every week. Let's say I sell 10,000 pounds a week. I haven't seen a 3 to 5% increase. And when we click on sheet aluminum prices, we scroll down a little bit, we're going to see the price for sheet aluminum averaging at 46 cents, which is really about where it's been. We're starting to see the prices tick up here, 50, 40, 43, 48, 50, 47. Nice increases over the last month, but that isn't enough to really move the needle, because that supply and demand on the outside consumer markets and industrial markets is not there. Now, when I look at things like aluminum siding, we scroll down just a little bit. We've seen siding prices at 53 cents. So this is where our videos kick in. How can you sort and separate materials to make more money? Are you someone that keeps your cast aluminum with your sheet aluminum, with your siding and gutters? If you are, we have different videos on YouTube that talk about separating these materials, because you could have anywhere from a 5 to 10 cent increase per pound just by being able to go and separate your different grades of aluminum. Now, we have videos, and we'll show you a couple of previews, different types of aluminum scrap, whether it's sheet, 6061, things that you may not know about. So we're going to show you in the background here one of the videos where we talk about these different grades of aluminum. And that's why when you're sitting at home at night and you're watching the same TV show, that's where YouTube is so handy and useful, because you can see different tips that I'm showing you as a scrapyard owner that's taken me years to learn about and years to be able to really act on and show you how to make more money with these items. So aluminum prices up over the last week, but we're not seeing a huge increase on the markets or on the industry demand, whether it comes to aerospace or other types of technologies. I'm seeing electric vehicles starting to dip themselves down a little bit. So a lot of electric vehicles are using more and more aluminum to keep the bodies lighter, as those big heavy banks of batteries are underneath, really weighing them down. So again, more things that we're looking at when it comes to consumer and commercial demand versus the supply that's out there, which is very, very strong. We're seeing strong strong demand right now, strong supplies right now, and the demand is not nearly as strong as the supplies are. So we're looking at those. Now we are looking, we saw a bunch of social comments. We read these all the time. The other day, we posted a short on YouTube, and maybe we can pull it up. It was talking about a hard drive that we got in that was from 1983. It's just really cool to see what these things look like. So we have those on the YouTube shorts. You can check that out. Some people were upset that it wasn't in a museum, but what are you going to do when you get things in all the time? You can only save so many pieces of scrap that come in. So here you can see just a couple of cool things that we got in, now versus a few years ago versus, 30 something years ago. It just shows you, really 40 something years ago. Geez. It just shows you how things change over time. And we've had a lot of people talking about vehicle scrap on our Facebook group. So we have an auto wrecker series that is out there on our YouTube page that talks about different vehicle scrap, what to look for, what to be able to make money on. We have a whole series that we're going to bring up right here. I think it's a 6-part series talking about how to take cars apart, what is worth taking apart. We go through an auto wrecker that, that we work with often. And these are just a bunch of things that we've seen a lot of great comments on. And as you continue to comment in Facebook, Instagram, and these different social platforms, check out some of the videos, because chances are we've made a video on it somewhere in the last 15 years, as we've been making videos since 2009 or so. We've been doing this for 15 years. So our depth of knowledge in our videos, it's really just great content to learn from, whether it's 5 years old or 10 years old, just gives you something to look at. So scrappers, let us know what you want to hear about. Next week, I'm going to take a week off, not going to have the weekly report. So we'll have some videos coming out there. I'll give you some market tips that I hear as I go. We'll talk to you in 2 weeks. Today is Wednesday, January 24th, 2024. And until a couple weeks from now, I'm Tom, and I'll scrap you later.
Thanks for watching our video. For $2.99 a month, by becoming a member, you can get access to early videos, member-only videos, merchandise discounts from our store, and priority comments that we answer before answering any other scrappers. Click the link below to learn more. Until next time, scrap you later.